Welcome to the Natural Super Kids podcast, where you will discover practical strategies to inspire you to boost the health and nutrition of your kids. I'm Jessica Donovan, a qualified naturopath specialising in kids' health, and I want to make it as easy as possible for you to raise healthy and happy kids. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Natural Super Kids podcast. I hope you're all doing really well today. So today we are talking about a specific issue that I think many parents listening would have experienced or may be experiencing right now, which is infant colic. And to delve into this topic, I am joined by our nutritionist, Mel Kirkwood, who was on the podcast last week doing a bit of intro, telling us more about herself and what sort of led her into nutrition. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, it's just a really good conversational podcast you can go back and listen to at some point. Welcome back, Mel.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
That's good. So, last week was a really kind of a general chat, and this week we're getting really specific on a very common issue, which is infant colic. So can you tell us a little bit about what actually is colic and what are the most common symptoms?
Yeah, sure. So colic is a really common condition that we do see in clinic. It actually affects 1 in 5 babies. So, quite common, but it's pretty poorly understood. So we're not sure why it happens, and the diagnosis for it is still a bit blurry. So the symptoms of it is categorized by excessive crying or fussing and irritability for long periods of time, so 3+ hours, without a real obvious cause or illness. And the big thing is that babies with colic can't be consoled through physical touch. So it's those long periods of crying and distress that can't be soothed through any means, really. And it happens irrespective of breastfeeding or formula fed. So that's the tricky part as well, and generally happens up to the age of about 5 months. So they say that, once you kind of start solids at that 6-month mark, the symptoms do kind of ease. So, the symptoms would be long periods of crying, cannot be consoled, showing physical signs of discomfort, so arching back and legs up in the air, frowning and reddening of the face, and then also loud kind of stomach gurgling as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a tough one, because as you said, there's no sort of definitive kind of cause, and there's no way, it's really hard to sort of soothe these babies. So particularly for new parents, it can be like, you can feel really helpless. And I know we're going to get into, that importance of supporting parents through this as well. So you did mention that there's no sort of, it's confusing in terms of the cause and the diagnosis, but is there anything that parents should know?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to obviously go to your GP or your pediatrician first up to just make sure that it isn't anything else. So with any kind of prolonged discomfort, you should be going to a medical professional for a diagnosis, because it can often be hand in hand with reflux. So we want to make sure that it's not reflux and that it's just colic. So reflux is kind of when the stomach acid will move back up out of the stomach into the esophagus, so the food pipe, and it can cause discomfort. So then that would have a different kind of similar but different treatment plan. So first thing I would advise is to make sure you go to your GP. And then once a diagnosis is confirmed, then you can work on a treatment plan. So I guess the causes that we kind of look for first and foremost with breastfed babies would be mum's diet. So often with colicky babies, they can have a sensitivity to certain proteins such as cow's milk protein, and also those slowly absorbed short chain carbohydrates, so your high FODMAP foods. So that would be one of the first things to do, is to work with a practitioner to kind of get to the food that's causing the issues. So that can be a process of elimination. And I'm very mindful that families during this kind of phase with a colicky baby, it can be quite stressful. So the last thing you want to do is have this huge kind of diet regime of, removing foods. So that's why it's really beneficial to work with a practitioner who can guide you safely through that period of eliminating those foods. Another kind of cause would be to do with breastfeeding. So again, another breastfeeding issue. So it would be poor latch or incorrect latch, or tongue and lip tie. So resulting in, I guess, the baby taking in too much air when they are nursing. So with that one, I would advise to speak to a lactation consultant, just to rule that out as well, to make sure that you have the proper latch and there's no kind of underlying tongue or lip tie there.
Yeah,
and then
I just wanted to say I totally agree. Any sort of unsettled baby that's breastfeeding, that's one of the first things you want to do, isn't it? Like, get support with breastfeeding, with latch, with ties that could be going on.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess after the feed, the position of your baby, so making sure that they're kept upright, so they digest that food and it's not kind of like sitting anywhere, kind of fermenting and causing that wind and discomfort as well. So whether they need to be held after a feed in like a carrier or things like that, that can often be beneficial for those colicky babies. And then the last thing would be any kind of gastrointestinal concerns, so imbalances with pathogens and bacteria in the infant's microbiome. So this is a huge topic in itself, but the simplified version of it is that studies indicate that babies with colic have an imbalance of good and bad pathogens in their gut. So they have more of those kind of, I shouldn't call them bad bacteria, but bad bacteria that release endotoxins. And so endotoxins cause quite a lot of inflammation in the gut, which can increase the gas and the bloating and, the discomfort in the gut. And then they noted that there was a decrease in the beneficial bacteria. So those bifidobacteria and the lactobacilli, which causes those anti-inflammatory modulations and properties in the gut. So that's something to be mindful of, and that's where we get down the route of treating with specific probiotic strains to kind of balance out that good and bad bacteria in the infant's gut.
Yes, that's such a good point. And I find, we've talked about it so much on the podcast, gut health and the microbiome. So we've got lots of previous episodes that you can go and listen to if you're interested in delving into this. If you go to our podcast bundles, you'll find a gut health bundle that sort of delves into more about what Mel's talking about. And so often it's, a gastrointestinal imbalance, I think, when it comes to colic. So that's, a really good point. So what about treatment? So do you have, I guess, some tips or the things that we should be looking at when it comes to treating colic in babies?
Yeah, sure. Just before we go into treatment, I want to make note of formula-fed babies because
yes.
So with formula-fed babies, it could just be the formula you're feeding your baby, especially the cow's milk one. So any formula that kind of has that cow's milk protein, so you might have to just adapt and go to like a goat's milk or an allergy-free formula. And it is quite hard, I guess, with infants because they can't tell you what's wrong with them. So it is really reliant on either the parent who's breastfeeding or, choosing the right formula. And unfortunately, it is a bit of trial and error. So it's not going to probably be an overnight fix, but, you've got to kind of figure out what it is. And unfortunately, it can take a bit of time sometimes. So, so with treatment, we really want to look at going back to, I guess, the good and bad bacteria, specific probiotic strains that will kind of reduce the inflammation of the gut lining and, downregulate those kind of the gassiness and the discomfort and things like that. So there's quite a lot of study on 2 specific probiotic strains. So the first one being Lactobacillus reuteri. So the study showed that with the oral administration of this Lactobacillus reuteri, and it's a specific strain, it resulted in a 50% reduction in crying time compared to placebo. So that one has a lot of great benefits and a lot of good studies to back up the positives of treatment with that specific probiotic strain. And the next one is Bifidobacterium breve. So this one in the study, they compared pharmaceutical colic medication versus this specific probiotic strain. And within the first week of the study, the prolonged crying decreased in the babies with the probiotics versus the baby on the prescription medication.
Wow,
so
that's pretty promising, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was in both breastfed and formula-fed babies. So it improved the crying time and also their sleep overnight as well. So getting onto those probiotics is probably the first step. Once you kind of eliminate the foods in the breastfed mum and you get onto the formula, you want to then rebuild the gut. And choosing the right strain is really, really important when it comes to probiotics. So these 2 have studies to back up their claims that they will help in colicky babies.
And I'm so glad that you made that point because we've talked about that before on the podcast as well, that not all probiotics are created equal, particularly for different conditions, and I think a lot of people don't realize that there are all kinds of different strains of probiotics, and different strains help in different ways in the gut. So it's really important to be using the correct strain. And I think those studies that you mentioned then just really highlight the fact that, the importance of that healthy microbiome on babies and kids' well-being in general. And there's so many different things within our modern diet and lifestyle that are having a negative effect on the microbiome, whether that is, even in the preconception period and throughout pregnancy and the way babies are birthed and fed. There's so many different factors. So really important for so many different reasons to be looking after our own microbiomes as mums and mums to be, and then our babies' microbiomes from as early as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Super, super important, especially, in that preconception phase, because it just, how your gut is and preconception and pregnancy will go through to your infant. So, ensuring you're eating the right foods, not too many inflammatory foods and things like that. Obviously, it goes without saying, no, smoking, drugs or alcohol, but also, taking a good probiotic during your pregnancy will really, really help in the long run when it comes to infancy.
Yes, definitely. We can prevent so many of these issues by working sort of earlier. And if you missed Mel's episode last week when we were sort of introducing Mel, this is an area that Mel, is really interested in and works a lot in, is that preconception, fertility, pregnancy, and then infant nutrition.
Yeah.
So anything else to say about treatment before we move on?
Sorry. So another kind of easy one would be finding relief through herbal tea. So I feel like tea just doesn't get enough airtime. Mm-hmm. It's so beneficial and medicinal. So in terms of colic, you're kind of looking at chamomile, aniseed, caraway, nettle, fennel, kind of those real pungent, warming kind of herbs. And they have, antispasmodic and calmative effects. So you would be, as the mother, the breastfeeding mum, drinking this tea, and that would come through your breast milk. So they, are really beneficial in reducing flatulence, and your kind of colicky symptoms. And then on the same kind of realm as that would be, a product that you can get from the chemist called Iberogast, which has 9 medicinal herbs in it. And that is such a great product that you can get over the counter when it comes to all things kind of gastrointestinal, so IBS, colic, reflux, constipation, everything. But same thing would be mum ingesting this one and through the breast milk. And then once they get a little bit older, you could have the appropriate dose for your baby to have it directly. But with that one, just work with a practitioner to have the right dosage.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, herbs can be really beneficial, like the herbal tea and the Iberogast that you recommended, for like soothing the symptoms. But I do find, that the work on the microbiome and the work on the diet still need to be done when you're taking these products as well. Yeah. So your top things would be making sure you're breastfeeding correctly, and then maternal diet or the right formula, and then the building up that microbiome. They're kind of like the top things to kind of work on. Definitely. But I know personally I've had lots of great success with that Iberogast product. And also I love that you mentioned the herbal teas as well, because I agree, they don't get enough airtime. They're really lovely and gentle for, infant care. And a nice thing, a nice little routine for mum to do is to sit down and have a nice cup of herbal tea sort of a few times throughout the day for her well-being as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because that's such a huge thing as well. Yes. I think maternal and paternal, any caregiver really, that's dealing with a colicky baby, it's grueling. So making sure that you have appropriate support, because if your baby is crying all day and all night, for weeks on end, it can really, really get to you. So having strategies in place and having that support network and not being afraid to ask for help is really important for parents and caregivers of colicky babies.
Huge, I think. And this is where having a practitioner can be really helpful as well, because we're like, for example, here at Natural Super Kids, we're not just looking at eliminating baby's symptoms. We're also supporting the caregiver, the parents, and their mental health during this time. So any like quick tips for that before we sort of finish up?
Yeah, so I think allocating shifts if you have a partner. So, you say you look after the baby for the next hour. I'm going to go have a bath or a shower or walk around the block, just to give you that moment of freedom and relief.
And just a break.
Yeah. And then I guess going from there, kind of reaching out to your support network and asking, even if it's for 30 minutes, like, can you just please come over and hold my baby while I, go out and sit in the garden?
Yeah.
It's as simple as that, really. Or I would probably say, like, leave the home so you don't hear the baby, because that can also affect your nervous system. So constantly hearing that baby and crying can kind of, like, make you tense and things like that.
It triggers the kind of fight and flight response, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. Obviously, it goes without saying to reach out to your GP. So if you're finding that things are becoming too hard to manage, making sure that you kind of lean on your GP or your maternal healthcare nurse or your nutritionist or naturopath. So having those practitioners there so you can kind of have coping strategies in place. Just making sure that that it's hard when you're in the moment, but this moment will pass. Like it is grueling, but it's not going to last forever. And I know the last thing you want to hear is a baby who is in discomfort and in pain, but you will get through it. There is light at the end of the tunnel, and you've got to keep focusing on that light at the end of the tunnel, because this period in your life, it's not going to last forever. It will get better.
Yes, and as you said right at the start, like, it's that kind of, that light at the end of the tunnel, or that relief is, that it does tend to settle down at around the 5 or 6 month mark.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is, hard when you're, week 1 or week 2 of this, and you're like, you've got 18 more weeks of this. But I think working with a nutritionist or a naturopath to kind of also not only ease the symptoms with your baby, but to support your mental health as a family is just really, really important through this phase of parenthood.
Definitely. And, that colic is known to settle down on its own at the 5 or 6 month mark. But if you get the right treatment and you can get to kind of the bottom of what's going on for your baby, it can be much quicker than that.
Yeah. Decrease those kind of symptoms and make it a bit more, I don't want to say enjoyable. I don't know what the word.
Copable.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So sending lots of love out to any parents that are dealing with this right now. We can certainly help here at Natural Super Kids. We'll make sure that the link to book an appointment with Mel, which all happens online, so it's really nice and convenient, is in the show notes. But also, Mel's shared some really great advice and places that you can start yourself as well. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on this really important topic, Mel.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. Head on over to our website, naturalsuperkids.com, for the show notes for this episode, as well as a whole heap of inspiration to help you raise healthy and happy kids. I'll see you next week.